Hello, fitness business nerds. What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today I'm here with a brand new friend I'm just meeting for the first time. It's Hye Jin Kalgaonkar. Did I get that right, Hye Jin?
You got it. Well done, Michael.
Fantastic. And friends, Hye Jin is the CEO, founder, owner of Original Hot Yoga, Hot Power Vinyasa, Inferno Hot Pilates, and she has other modalities that she works with. She's a real fitness entrepreneur with, I think, 5 locations right now. And we're going to talk about that in our conversation today. So thank you for being here with me, Hye Jin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually you might be the first kind of yoga and Pilates person on this podcast, which is kind of wild now that I think about it. So you're really representing for your corner of the industry here today. So thanks in advance for that. First, you want to just give our listeners just a quick origin story of how you started your business, just so they can get a sense of kind of the direction you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, nice to meet everyone virtually or via the podcast. I grew up in Seattle, and my parents were always small business owners. We immigrated from South Korea, and they owned businesses ranging from little mini marts to restaurants to small little gas station kind of mini mart things. So I grew up around small business ownership 24/7. And it was instilled in me at a very young age that small business is for those who are not strong in English, and that it's the job that you do because you don't have an education. And so the dream was go to college, get a good career, and then get hired by a Fortune 500 company, wear a suit, have a briefcase, and have healthcare and benefits. I mean, that was pretty much my path. And I started working for a pharmaceutical company, and I've got background in sales, marketing, organizational management, HR. But through that career, I traveled the world a lot, and I found myself actually in New York City as a sales manager, and I found hot yoga there. And once I started that practice, growing up, I was very competitive in gymnastics and cheerleading and any kind of cardio, high intensity thing. I've done it all, right? But once I did yoga, I had never felt better in body and mind. And I was like, why the heck am I beating up my body every single day in the gym, doing all this stuff when I feel so good going to hot yoga every day? And so once I started the practice, I was like, okay, I have to do this for the rest of my life. And when we came, again, we traveled the world, and our home base was Indianapolis, where our corporate headquarters are currently located. And there was really just no good hot yoga studios in Indianapolis. And so at that time, when we were living overseas in Vienna, Austria, and I know I'm kind of popping around everywhere here, I had my first child, and then I took her and we went to yoga teacher training because I actually had some time off of work being on maternity leave. Once I got into teaching yoga, I just knew that this is what I wanted to share. I just knew I couldn't go back to that corporate lifestyle. And so when it was time to move back to Indianapolis, the yoga scene still hadn't changed since when I had moved away from there about 3 years prior. It was really came out of a selfish decision. I was like, okay, well, if there's no hot yoga there, I'm going to have to just build it myself. And so here we are, totally against what was instilled in me, and at a very young age. And when I told my parents that I was going to leave my corporate job and start a business, I mean, the fear on their faces, they were like, are you sure? Why would you do that? And really, it was just my passion for sharing the practice. I was like, and also creating a space where I could practice too. There was really no other choice. So that was back in 2013. We'll be celebrating 10 years as a brand next year. So we're right now really busy planning our 10-year campaign. And in those 10 years, obviously we survived COVID. That was a huge thing, but we also grew our business to 5 studio locations, and we're still actively growing. 2 of those locations we opened in the middle of the pandemic, like literally like it was
Wow.
happening and we were building out, and we were like, okay, we got to move forward and open these studios. So not only surviving, but also growing during the pandemic, I think is very, you know, I don't think there's many stories like that out there.
No, no, I've certainly not heard it yet. Well, thank you so much for that backstory. I think it's such a fascinating example of so many things. One is how our parents can just be wrong sometimes, and and two, how much it really can pay off to kind of follow your bliss, right? And to go with the things where you have a lot of passion. So clearly that's worked for you, and I have no doubt your parents are more than proud these days. So let's just talk about that last piece that you mentioned there, which is scaling the business, right? It's something that whether our listeners own a yoga studio or a training gym, scaling is hard. Scaling and opening during a pandemic is a whole other topic as well. But I want to talk a little bit about just the lessons you've been learning about scaling the business. So when you first started to go from a single location to a second location, talk to me about that first few steps. What are the most important systems and processes you learned to scale in that first
Hmm.
expansion?
So interestingly, the second location, we knew like if we were to open a second one, we would open it in the downtown part of the city. We could see the growth
Hmm.
happening there, but I wish I could tell you it was very strategic and we had this plan and this, and it was nothing like that. It was
Yep.
just like, let's take a look around. Let's see what's down there, from a space
Yep.
standpoint. And long story short, we ended up finding the perfect space. It's a historic, building. It's actually the original firehouse of
Mm,
Indianapolis, which I think is very appropriate that the hot room
wow.
is located in the firehouse. But
Seriously.
it was one of those, we were destined to be there. And there's a unique story around that too that I won't get into right now. But we were just destined to be there. And like, I, at that point, we were about a year and a half into the first studio. And we honestly didn't have like the systems, the processes, the
Mhm.
documentation, even the people to be able to do it. But because I knew that this is where we had to be, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So, which we did. But looking back, what I what I would have done if I had planned it out perfectly is I would have had my current manager, who was managing the first location, actively training the next manager to take her spot. And
Mhm.
then that first manager, the OG manager, would be the one who would go and do the pre sales and build out and help grow the second studio location and help her gain more skills as a leader, right? And so we ended up doing that where we got the individuals, the leaders in place. But now, as we're scaling and growing, we're always thinking, who is going to take that person's spot? Who is on the bench? Continuously recruiting for talent pipeline because things start moving quickly and things change too, right? And so you are always recruiting. I can't say it enough.
Yeah,
There's never a moment where I'm not recruiting. Even if I'm totally full, the bench is full, I've got all the classes covered, but I see somebody with passion and talent and something that I need on my team, I'm going to actively ask, are you open to new opportunities? Yeah.
fantastic.
And
Yeah,
so the people part of it is super important because you don't want to let your current locations start going downhill while you're growing, right? And so if you can actively train and coach your leadership with the current locations and have those leaders start gaining new skills by opening other locations, that's what we currently do with our locations now as we grow. Also, I'm sure everyone's heard it on this podcast, I'm sure millions of times, systems, processes, documentation, just all the little things that you're like, duh, you got to document. And
yeah,
just make sure that there's a really tight training process so that the training of new employees can take a lot of time. And
mhm.
if there's not clarity and support for that individual, um, there's a high likelihood that we'll lose them within the first couple of months, right? They're super, super excited. And then they're like, okay, wait a minute. I'm unclear of what my expectations are. I'm unsupported. I'm not sure exactly how to do the things that you're asking me to do. I don't like this anymore, right? And
Yeah.
so having that training process really tight, having everything documented, and having continuously looking at your systems and processes to figure out what you can improve, because you can set it, but then also it's never done, right? You're always going
Yeah.
back to it and editing
Yeah.
it and updating it. So those would be the two big pieces as I'm scaling. In addition to that, obviously funding and money, all that
Mhm.
stuff is a big component of that. But those
That's great.
those two would be the big highlights.
Yeah, there's so much about that story I love, Hye Jin. I mean, even starting with the idea that your first expansion was not terribly well planned by your own admission, right? It was like, just shoot from the hip. We love this space. We'll figure it out. I know we have to
Mhm.
be here. I know when it expands. And I think even that is a great first lesson for for our listeners, is that, when you're growing, sometimes it's okay to ready, fire, aim, to, to really just go with it. Not everything needs a strategic plan. Over time, you learned lessons about how to do it more efficiently with hopefully less stress. But in many cases, that's how a lot of businesses grow. So I think that's a great
Mhm.
lesson of itself. And the two other things I'm taking away from what you shared was, one, always be recruiting. I love the idea
Mhm.
that you illustrated this kind of like management leapfrog. Like, we're always training the next person, so that person can go take the next location, then the next person can take the next location. Right? That idea really resonates with me. So I think so much of scaling a business as an owner is just that idea of constantly replacing yourself, and then replacing the other people who you've developed, and then that final thing of having systems that are well documented and fantastic support for new people who are learning, I think is a fantastic takeaway for our listeners. I think so much of how I see my job as a leader is constantly managing potential and even just imagined anxieties on my team. And you
Mhm.
mentioned an anxiety that's very common, new people, which is, I'm excited for this job, but oh crap, I'm a few weeks in and I'm really unclear what's expected of me. What's my
Mhm.
role? How do I succeed here? So I'm so glad you mentioned that. So continuing on, now that you have 5 locations open, what are the kinds of challenges you're having these days with delivering a consistent experience? Obviously, what's working well, and what are you still figuring out in terms of delivering a consistent experience in all these different spaces?
I mean, you're exactly right. The brand that we've built by myself, like in the studios 24/7, is very different from me not being in the studios very often.
Hmm.
I mean, I teach here and there and I love practicing in the studios, but on the day-to-day operation standpoint, how do I ensure that our team of 100 people are executing on the brand and the vision and the culture that we've created in a consistent way? And so I think communication is super, super key. So have some sort of regular communication. So, whether it's weekly meetings with your leadership team every single Monday, and then the regional manager has a weekly meeting with their studio managers, and the studio managers have a way to share that information with their teams, but there's something that is consistently happening to be able to address things that are coming up that are not consistent with brand, or even updates, right? Or things that are coming up, right? So that we're all on the same page. Also, as a leader, just simple one-on-ones with individuals. Like, it doesn't have to be every single week, but like even once a quarter, right? Where you're touching base with them, checking in. How are you doing? Like, where do you want to go? Where is the next step for you, right? What are the pain points? What's going well? And just being able to be getting that one-on-one interaction in addition to the high level communication, super important. I also go back to the training process. Now more than ever, we've identified that we have to make sure that our training process is set up on a platform that everybody is getting the consistent experience, whether they're being hired on for a front desk sales associate, or or studio manager, or what, all the different roles, they're getting a consistent experience. What I've noticed is that our managers, for example, will know exactly how to do it, but then how they lead their teams on how to do it, they're all just a little different, right? And so
Hmm.
if we can all get on the same, and it's not, they're doing it all with good intentions with how they learned it. But, it's like the game telephone, right? You say one person and
Exactly.
then they kind of change it a little bit, right? And so
Yep.
creating a platform for everyone to go through the same experience when you're going into that role or position, you get the consistent training experience. And then obviously the additional support that you get from your local management team leadership.
Yeah. Hello, nerds. Michael here. I'm interrupting this episode with a very important announcement. I wouldn't interrupt if it wasn't important. And that's because enrollment is now open right now for Unicorn Society for 2023. We only open enrollment twice a year. We often have very few spots. We like to keep the group pretty small. That means if you're interested in joining the group you've likely heard about a million times in this podcast, now is your time to apply. Go to businessofunicorns.com. You'll see a place on our website to learn more about Unicorn Society and start the application process. And here's the thing, if you apply now before November 6th, you'll save a lot of money with our early bird rate, and so save the money now. In addition to saving the money, we'll also let you start right away. So if you apply before November 6th and you get accepted, we'll let you have the rest of the month of November and December free. So you don't start paying your dues until January. So that's pretty badass. Not only can you save money in an early bird period, but you can also get like maybe a month and a half free. That's pretty amazing. It's a great deal if I say so myself. If you have any questions about Unicorn Society, don't know if it's the right fit for you, talk to us anyway, or email us, michael@businessofunicorns.com, mark@businessofunicorns.com, ben@businessofunicorns.com, pete@businessofunicorns.com. Just email any of us. We're here to talk to you. But mark your calendar. November 6th, early bird ends. So get in there, my friends. Back to the episode. Yeah, well said. Well said. Well said, Hye Jin. I think the two things I'm taking away from that is one, the consistent pulse of meetings, right, allows your team to have great communication because there's a consistency to when they're meeting and how they're talking and what they're talking about. I think that's fantastic. And the second one there is to really dial in the training because you're at the point now where you can't possibly be in all the locations every single day. You're well past that
Mm-mm.
point. And
Mm-mm.
so making sure that everyone's singing from the same songbook consistently, I think is fantastic way of thinking about it. So amazing. I want to switch gears a little bit because there's some other things I want to pick your brain about. One is I also know that in your area and a lot of markets in the U.S. these days, yoga, Pilates, especially hot yoga, can be a little bit of a saturated. It can be a little saturated in some markets. It could be a lot of choice, a lot of competition. So I'm just curious to know. I know you think about this a lot, which is, how do you stand out? And I know one of the ways that you stand out as a brand is in your delivery, your approach to delivering the experience to your clients. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what is your kind of unique value proposition as a business, and how do you reinforce that on a regular basis?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me share with you when I first started hot yoga, it was a very, even for an athlete like myself, like it was very intimidating.
Mm.
Just going in, I remember being surrounded by a room of, I call them like gazelles. They were long and lean and like in their Lululemon and just, I'm like, real, and I just felt like short and stocky. I was like, what is going on here? But and then I put myself in the front row. I thought, I'll figure it out, right? And then
Mm.
immediately the instructor called me out, and I think his exact words were, "Little girl in the front, do you even know what you're doing?" And made me drag my mat to the back of the row, and just the whole,
Wow.
and not only that, like the smell, it just smelled just like stinky soccer shoes, like, and I was like, wow, I feel so good. And that's what's going to get me to come back. But that whole experience was awful. Like, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm.
the customer service to being welcoming to new clients, to the cleanliness of the studio, to just the overall experience. Right. And so through my travels, and I've traveled around the world and visited lots of yoga studios. My husband and I have just kind of picked out, like, what do we love from all of these studios, right? And when we build our own, what do we want that to feel like? And I was like, well, I definitely don't want it to feel like my first class, right? And so
Yeah.
our mission is really about creating community. I want to create a community where everyone, no matter your age, shape, size, color, like you come in and you feel like you belong. You feel safe and inspired to heal and strengthen your body and mind. And how we do that is through hot yoga and heated fitness. But really what we're in the business of is building community where people feel welcome to come in and take care of their bodies and minds. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that, from really um, building what does that client experience look like. And I want you to, like, if you're a studio owner listening to it, this episode, like outline exactly in detail what you want that experience to look like to the minute details. So for example, like in our document, we say, stand up, smile, eyes open. Like it is just like you're not sitting down. When people
Mm-hmm.
come in, you are standing up, you're smiling, and your eyes open, right? And because that one individual who took like a year of examining our social media and building up the courage to come in, and they walk in and like not even acknowledged, and they're the front desk person is just sitting there behind the desk. What an awful way to like welcome somebody into the studio.
Yep.
Really outlining in detail what you want that client experience to look like, especially for a new client. But also what's important to us is when you say creating a welcoming space for anyone, and I hear it all the time, people saying that in the studio, in the boutique fitness world especially, you got to show it, right? And I think one thing
Mm-hmm.
is I look, obviously I'm not a white woman, and so I think that also creates this invitation of people coming in that are more diverse, but also we've taken even more efforts to make it a welcoming community, because no matter how much you say you're welcome here, if people don't see people like themselves in the classes, they don't feel welcome. No matter how nice you are, right? And so
Yep.
we've taken the effort, because diversity and inclusivity is really, really important to us. And I'll give you an example. Like my husband's Indian. Yoga started in India. Why are there no Indians in classes? I'm like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's so odd, right? And anyways, there's lots of reasons to that. I won't get into it this moment, but people need to see people like them in class. And so we took a baby step, and which ended up being a really big thing for us, which every teacher training, we award a scholarship for the teacher training to a BIPOC individual. So Black, Indigenous, person of color. If you affiliate with that, you fill out an essay, we blind the essays, and we award one person a full ride scholarship to yoga teacher training. And we've continuously done that over the years, where now, Michael, it's actually turned into a nonprofit arm of our business, where we are
Mm-hmm.
helping to fund up to 10 scholarships every single year. So that's about $40,000 that we're trying to raise to help award people scholarships and help diversify the wellness world. Another element of that is BIPOC only classes. We've actually done one class every single month where we invite in BIPOC individuals to the class. We create a very safe space for them, and it's been a great entry point for individuals to come in. And again, no matter how much you say it's welcoming, everyone can come and do this yoga, when they come in and they see a whole room full of people that they can truly connect with and say, oh, these are my people, what a great entry point. And then they start feeling comfortable to coming into regular classes. So really big diversity efforts that we're doing here in our business to really support our mission statement.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Hye Jin. I mean, that's such fantastic work. I mean, there's so many people, especially over the last few years, businesses that have given a lot of lip service to the idea of being diverse, of being inclusive, of being a place where everyone's welcome. And you're really putting in the work to challenge yourself and challenge your community to really do that, to actually be that. So bravo to you. I think it's a great example for all our listeners. Let me just recap a few things that I'm taking away from what you just shared. The the first thing was the idea that your unique value proposition here is really your experience. And I love the story you told about how crappy your first experience was, because I think often that can be a great jumping off point for what you want to create in the world is from the pain you experienced in your own lived experience. So I think that's fantastic, and the fact that your experience is really dialed in, and the advice you gave to our listeners, I want to repeat and underline, which is think about your client experience and write it down word for word. Treat it like a script, treat it like a play, get really clear. In some cases, we do storyboarding with our clients of what the client experience can look like, but really get clear. I love it. Stand up, eyes open, smile. It's very specific, right? It's so great. And then I think, and I think that the idea that you then demonstrate that your client experience is welcoming and inclusive to everyone is you're really putting your money where your mouth is and your efforts where your mouth is. So raising money to expand the diversity of people who are working in your building and in our industry. Fantastic. I think classes for people who look different than the typical client you have. Fantastic idea. And I think the big thing I'm taking away from this, and I hope our listeners are too, is that if you want to have people who look different than your current clients in your space, you need to open the door to them differently. You might need to, you might need to have classes that are just for older people. You need to have classes just for people who maybe can't always afford your services, right? There's all kinds of ways that you can get creative in opening your door. Because if they can see other people in your space, if they can see other people in your marketing that look like them, they're more likely to feel that sense of safety and belonging. So I think those are fantastic. Yeah, those are fantastic takeaways, Hye Jin. And I have no doubt that that's helping distinguish you from other people in the marketplace as being a place that truly is welcoming to all people of ages, colors, sizes. So congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Michael.
yeah. So in our final few minutes here, I want to just end with what's next for Hye Jin? I mean, clearly you're expanding. You say you're still growing. So how do you at this point in your career think about what you want to do next? You have so many options. Clearly you've proven you can do anything you set your mind to in this space. I'm sure others. So how do you at this point in your life as an entrepreneur decide where to put your time next?
Such a great question. Well, I do have two young girls, and they're
Mm.
12 and 10.
So
And with
they
their
probably have something to
activities,
say about
yeah,
that.
they just need their mom more these
Yep.
days, right? And so for me personally, I love working. Like I love being in the business. But really growing our team so that I can have that opportunity to be with my girls and my family a little bit more,
Mm.
especially during there's time. I count the number of summers I have left with them, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Also, in addition to that, we have a global wellness retreats side of our business where we travel the world and we take communities to different parts of the world and explore, have great food experiences, wellness, connection, self-discovery, reflection, right? And so we're really growing that part of our business. I think a lot of people are looking for not only ways even more now to travel, but also do it in a way where they make their health a priority and connection
Mm.
a priority. So that's really great. And then growing our Leadership Institute and our teacher training programs to enhance what we currently have. Continuing education of instructors is also a really big initiative, in addition to our nonprofit and so much more coming. Yeah, brick and mortar
Yeah.
studios. Yeah, all that.
Great. Well, good for you. That's all so exciting. And I love that it's a combination of more time with family and doubling down on your personal life and also looking for what the clients want more of and trying to offer it. So yeah, what a fantastic vision. Well, thank you for this conversation, Hye Jin. If our listeners want to learn more about you, about your studios, where can they find more information on the interwebs?
Yeah, so Instagram handles the best way, HJK Yoga, or you can follow us at The Hot Room Yoga.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for this conversation, Hye Jin, and I hope to have you back someday so we can talk about whatever you're making next. Thanks again for your time.
All right. Thank you, Michael.